Good evening. Welcome to the May 24th, 2023 meeting of the Town of Southampton Conservation Board. In accordance with the Town Board's adoption of Local Law Number 14 of 2022, the board's meetings are being held both in person at Town Hall and via video conference through Zoom webinar. The link to participate in this meeting via video conference can be found on the town's website at the Town Clerk's Agendas and Meetings portal. You can also watch the live stream video and submit written comments for the public record through the town website. If you are attending via Zoom and wish to speak during this meeting, then please click on the raise hand icon. As a reminder to all applicants, agents, and members of the public who wish to speak at the meeting, please state your name and Hamilton residence for the record. Thank you. I would invite everyone to rise for the salute to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
What is your pleasure on the minutes of May 10th, 2023?
Move to accept. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearings, A 019125, Jeffrey W. Howell. The applicant requests adjournment to June 28, 2023. Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak on this application?
Motion to adjourn to June 28, 2023.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
You all right? Yeah. Traffic?
No.
The next public hearing is A 022054, Paul Basic and Lezo Gallo. Leza Gallo.
Did receive affidavits of posting and mailing, and the board has jurisdiction to open the vote.
Thank you.
Getting anything new tonight?
With that,
Any new drawings tonight?
yes, we're handing in 7 packets
Won't
of
take anything in?
revised plot plans and revised landscaping plans.
Pass them down. I don't know what this is. One-on-one.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, I'll pass them down. Make it for two, huh?
Is the middle letter of your client's last name S or Z?
All right, that's another set.
Leza,
Okay, what,
L-E-Z-A.
you're missing this?
No,
Okay,
that's
so-
You
basic,
got two?
B-A-Z-E?
Oh,
Okay, that can go down.
Okay, this goes down, and this too?
Okay.
Okay.
There's a
second
place
sheet
where it's
there?
Z.
We have a typo, we just didn't know which one was a typo.
That can go down.
Trying to
It
better
doesn't
the
have any
work, one
significance
typo
now,
at
but
a
when we get the
time.
resolution,
Do we have
Get it
enough
right.
down there, or? You have one, Joe?
Not yet, no.
I don't have one.
So,
I don't know.
these two. Is that something different?
And it's the same thing?
are these all, are there 2 pages you're handing out?
Yeah, there's
2 packets, correct.
staple thing, and then the one,
And then a fold-out
fold-out thing.
C-size.
and then a package of photos.
We can look at it.
Do you have an extra one, Suzanne?
I passed them down, Susanna. They're on their way.
They're on their way, that's okay, thank you. below his peg grade.
And for those microphones, please.
Charlie, what was that question?
So be careful of the microphone.
Yes.
Oh, okay, yes. When the paper hits the microphone, it's like hitting two pieces of steel together.
It's like thunder.
Sorry, Charlie.
Not a problem.
Did you,
Go ahead,
is that
Harry.
on the pictures?
My name is Edward Moulter. Our office is at 700 Lakeland Avenue, Suite 2A1, Bohemia, New York. Zip is 11716. Good evening, Chairman and members of the board. We are in front of you, or I'm in front of you representing Paul Basuk and Lisa Gallo, the owners of 40 Whalers Drive in Sag Harbor. Paul and Lisa would like to add a small first floor addition of approximately 315 square feet, converting an existing porch of 107 square feet and adding new first floor space of 208 square feet. Also adding an open porch of 532 square feet, thus giving us a total of lot coverage of additional 847 square feet. The landscaping plans that you guys have in front of you illustrates we're decreasing the existing clearing from 15,386.65 square feet, or 73.72%, to 12,522.9 square feet, or 60%, as required by code, by adding revegetation of 2,863.75 square feet, illustrated by the plot plan that you guys have in front of you. We feel that this revegetation plan accomplishes all the requirements of restoring the clearing to 60% from 73.72%. Areas that will minimally affect the homeowners on how they utilize the property.
Question on that. I'm looking at this color schematic,
Plot plan, yep.
and I see a place that has green slash lines.
Yep,
That's part of it,
that's part of it, correct.
and then a part that is yellow,
Correct,
and that's part of it?
correct.
So those are the two additions you're adding?
Those are the two additional revegetation areas that we're adding.
Okay.
And the square footage of both of those are off to the lower left-hand corner of the page. Yellow is area A, the green is area B. The red lines that are on that plan are the existing limits of the existing clearing when the property was denoted when I think they did the pool back in 2002.
Now, there already is a buffer on this property, correct?
Correct.
And does part of that yellow shaded area overlap that buffer?
No, that's to the edge of the existing clearing that was there already.
Okay, it's not clear to me just where that existing buffer is located.
I believe it says edge of clearing.
Susanna Herman and Consultants. I have a copy of the approval.
Yeah, I have
from-
a better copy
You
of
have a
that too.
better
Yeah.
copy? When you see that, that makes it much
Can you
easier.
get
I
closer?
actually traced that from,
Sorry, Charlie. You have a better copy.
is that it?
Yes.
Yep.
Well, this is the DEC approval, but it's the same. Is it okay to hand me this
Yeah,
copy?
yeah.
Do you want me to get it stamped?
Please.
And then I guess I'll hand it over to you.
Susanna Herman and Consultants for the applicant. As you can see, I don't know if you've all gotten a chance to look at it. The existing edge of clearing is more or less equivalent to the covenant that was approved in 2002. We got that permit from this board for a swimming pool on the landward side of the house, the south side of the house, in the side yard. It's a little bit out of compliance, but not that bad. There's a fence that is along the northern edge of the existing lawn area, which is about 2 feet too far into the buffer area. So that fence will be relocated. And when the buffer was approved back in 2002, there was that curvilinear area to the north of the house, which was not part of the buffer. And that area is sort of unkempt already. It's not mowed or maintained lawn. It's basically left natural. I think it was accidentally mowed a few years ago and nothing really came back. So that area would be actively revegetated according to the plantings plan proposed.
And would you relocate the well?
No. It's not that uncommon for the well to be allowed within the buffer area. It was allowed to remain as part of the original covenant. We've done this before. We've typically written the covenant so that the well is allowed to remain in that buffer area. There is, however, a propane tank that's in the buffer, which was there when the current owners bought the house. That was put there by the previous owner before the buffer was put in place. Back in 2002, no one really picked up on it, and no one mentioned that we needed to move the propane tank. We would now move the propane tank out of the buffer area. As I mentioned, it was put there by the previous owner. We are looking at putting that up against the accessory structure near where the pool equipment's located, and doing an above ground tank or 2 above ground tanks in lieu of a buried propane tank.
Is that to service to heat the pool?
I think the propane tank's for the house. Is that correct? Yeah.
The propane
If you're
tank.
gonna talk, you have to come here.
Lisa Gallo. The propane tank heats the house, provides cooking for the stove, and then in the winter, and then in the summer it heats the pool.
Okay, anything else?
Yeah, I have a. So, the objective of the application before you is twofold. One is that they would like to have a bedroom on the first floor. As they're getting older, they're realizing the importance of having a first floor bedroom, and additionally, a porch on the front to have a nice place to sit. The second objective is to bring the property into compliance. There are a couple of things, many from the previous owner of the property, some that happened 20 years ago that are not in compliance with the previous permits, and the homeowners are good stewards and good residents of the community and want to bring the property into compliance. I read through the staff report. I didn't do the initial application, but I read through the staff report prepared by Marty Shea, and he has a list of items, and they're agreeable to all of them, including removing the fence that's higher than 6 feet, installing an IA sanitary system, installing dry wells. The house was built, we think, in 1990, which there wasn't nearly as much attention paid at that time to dry wells and drainage issues. So the house would be brought into compliance with respect to drainage. The driveway is asphalt. That will be removed and replaced with a pervious driveway. There are some ornamental grasses that he lists and some other invasive species, and they've agreed to remove those. They haven't planted anything on this property. It's really just been left as is from the previous owners of the property. So they would remove invasive plants, which is shown on the revegetation plan that you have been given, and relocate the propane tank, as I mentioned. The other thing that we would like to do is legalize a 10 by 12 shed that was put on the property. Unfortunately, they received bad information, maybe asked the question wrong, from the town when asked if they needed a permit for a shed. And as you may know, you don't need a building permit for a 10 by 12 shed typically, unless you are adjacent to wetlands. Obviously, you need a wetland permit. So they did install a 10 by 12 shed that does not have permits. And we're trying to find a place where we can place that. Where it is currently is in the location of the proposed sanitary system expansion pools. So the proposal is to relocate the shed. The current survey shows the shed to be relocated closer to the pond than the existing location. And I don't know how the board feels about that.
You probably do.
I do. You tell me, but I have a feeling you're going to want to see that shed moved to a location that's at least 100 feet from the wetlands. And we're trying to figure out where that's going to go. Our current plan is to put it between the pool and the other accessory structure.
What kind of foundation is it on now?
It's in the pictures that I handed up. Picture number 7. It's not on a foundation, it's just on little posts. Is that correct, Lisa?
It's on kind of stilts, you could say.
So it would be easy to relocate. There's no concrete
I- I've
foundation
been
or
there,
anything
yeah.
underneath
I've been
it.
there. Okay. But thank you.
So currently, we're talking about relocating it between the pool and the former garage.
That's the obvious spot on the property where there is space. There
It
aren't
won't
very
be
many places.
pretty, but I can't find any other location that will work. That will be at least 10 feet from the septic system, 100 feet from the wetlands, and at least 10 feet from the property line.
And
But it-
no pressure treated posts that would be on or anything, it would just be some other arrangement, just not, if you're gonna use wooden posts, it can't be CCA.
Okay, we can make that a permit condition. I don't think that would be an issue.
But there's no way that it could be allowed to be, you see, now it is 100 feet from the wetlands. I thought that was good enough because, you know, I was told you could get a 10 by 12 shed as long as it was 10 feet from the property line, so I did that. And I knew we had the wetlands, so I went the 100 feet from the wetlands. But now that's where the septic is gonna go, so if the shed were moved north, that would be within 100 feet of the wetlands. Would that be at all permissible if it were on wooden
The
stilts or
code
something?
suggests, the code recommends setback, because it's a tiger salamander pond, the code recommends a 150-foot setback for structures. 125 setback for structures.
Okay.
And that's why we really can't say yes to that question. Because there is another spot in between the pool and the shed.
I can see the face.
My husband's not gonna like that. Well, you see, if you put the shed between the pool and the structure, you'll lose visibility between the two, you know.
It'll be right smack in front of that building.
Yeah.
Which, speaking of that building, the previous, before we put in the swimming pool, that was a garage. But when we came to this board to get permission for the swimming pool, originally we proposed it in the backyard. The board suggested moving it to the driveway location. So that is no longer a garage because the pool's where the driveway was. So that has been converted to basically a recreation room with a ping pong table and a sofa to hang out. The previous owners of the property, however, had used it as an apartment, and the current homeowners ripped out the kitchen, so there's no sleeping, there's no longer a kitchen there. But one thing that we would offer to do, or should do, in order to bring the property into compliance would be to go to the building department and get a building permit to convert that from garage into rec room / pool house. There is a bathroom in the building. It's not currently being used, but the proposed project would hook that bathroom up to the new IA system.
Is there space between the IA system and the other frame building?
Between the IA and the existing building? I don't believe so.
Don't know if there's any leniency for distances between structures when we're talking about a 10 by 12 shed.
It would have to be 10 feet from the sanitary system.
Okay.
So the septic can't be moved.
I mean, the only
Further
other option
north.
would be to move the septic system north, farther from the garage building.
Is that possible?
Well, I'll tell you what, before we get into all these details of it, I would like to hear the staff report,
Okay.
and then let's go back and see where we are and see what the possibilities are.
Okay.
Okay.
The only other thing that I wanted to mention is that of the long list of items that are in the staff report requesting revisions, modification, legalizations, removals, we're willing to do all of them. The only issue is the buffer that staff proposed is basically the entire backyard. And as you can see from the photographs, it's specifically the area that's most used by the family. There's a swing set there, it's a play area, it's right off the back porch. So we would propose to do a different buffer to try to
Okay.
encompass the same amount of square footage. However,
Okay. Let's-
that area is,
Let's listen
Okay.
to Teresa, and then let's see what we can do after that.
okay.
Good evening, Teresa Mason from the Environment Division. As Chairman Ludlow explained, the parcel is subject to the greater 125-foot structural wetland setback because it is not only a pond that contains rare and endangered species, but itself, the pond, is a coastal plains pond, which is a rare community type under New York State. It's also part of the Long Pond Greenbelt, which has some of the highest concentrations of rare and endangered species in the state. And that's why the more stringent requirement for a 125-foot setback is required. That provision of the code that requires the greater 125-foot setback also requires that a buffer with an average width of 100 feet be provided. Currently, the existing buffer extends about 75 feet, and if you look at the Environment Division staff sketch, which was prepared as part of the application with the preliminary advisory report, you can see the existing covenanted buffer in dark hatching. And again, that's about 75 feet. And what we're asking for is that the buffer be expanded somewhat. It does encompass the existing natural area in the front of the house, between the house and the road. And it also does incorporate some portions of the rear property line. Some other issues to be aware of is that the parcel is not in compliance with the terms of, the requirements of the Aquifer Protection Overlay District, which states that they have to have a minimum of 40% of natural vegetation on their property. Having worked with the planning board in the past on revegetation plans, generally speaking, they like to see large contiguous blocks. So the strip of revegetation proposed on the southerly property line is generally not consistent with their requirements. They would like to see a bigger block. Establishing a buffer consistent with our sketch, or more consistent with our sketch, would be more in keeping with the planning board's requirements for large contiguous blocks of natural vegetation when you're doing revegetation for aquifer protection overlay district. We would be willing to consider alternative sketches if we could come up with something that gives an equivalent block of native vegetation between the wetlands and the redevelopment. But a lot of relief is required for this property. The existing structure is about 75 feet, where 125 feet is required. The septic system is not going to meet the required 175-foot wetland setback. So yes, it does require that a buffer be established, and we would ask for a portion of the lawn to be reverted back to natural vegetation as part of that mitigative actions. But at the end of the day, they have to bring the parcel into compliance with Aquifer Protection Overlay District, and the code does state that they need to provide as much of a buffer within 100 feet as possible under the permit issuance standards. Just double checking my notes here. We did have some comments with respect to the revegetation plan, revisions that need to be made, but obviously those would need to be finalized based on a finalized buffer plan. Do you have any questions for me?
Not yet.
Yes, there's some duplicity in a buffer along the south. Let me get oriented with all these. Yes, south, the south buffer, the parting green,
Yes.
It's labeled B.
would not be necessary if they agreed to the staff sketch.
That's correct. Well, I don't have the exact numbers, but I believe that would be correct.
And to be in compliance with the Aquifer Protection Overlay District, I believe Susanna said that their drawing does comply, which is fine, but for a better setback from the pond, the staff sketch is better, which virtually removes their backyard.
Yes, there is a large portion of lawn that would have to be restored to native vegetation if we proceed with the Environment Division sketch. But they still have the area atop the septic system to use as lawn. And then they still have a very large pool patio to have outdoor recreational space on for usable outdoor space. So there is some wiggle room with respect to having outdoor recreational space, even though they do have to restore a large portion of the property in order to bring the parcel into compliance with both APOD, which is Aquifer Protection Overlay District, and the buffer requirements under Chapter 325. Again, you know, the Environment Division is willing to review other sketches, alternative sketches. This is the best we thought would be to mitigate the impacts. If they want to submit another sketch, we're happy to review it and work with the applicant on it. Just with respect to the shed, I'd have to look at my my handbook. I have it downstairs for the health department. But if a shed is on a slab, I believe the setback is 5 feet to the septic system, but I'd have to double check.
Okay, so the APOD is, there's no problem coming into compliance with the APOD. The issue is going to be moving into compliance with the recommended setback from, or the recommended buffer, because it is a special pond and a higher standard goes in effect. Now, let's get a little deeper beyond the legal distance of a 100-foot buffer. What are we trying to achieve by establishing a 100-foot buffer? Where I'm going on this is, I'm wondering if we can achieve the purposes of that 100-foot buffer, but do it in a little more creative way that would give some more flexibility on this property. So what is it in particular that we need to pay attention to environmentally that 100-foot buffer is going to achieve?
So the reason why the town requires the 100-foot buffer for, properties with rare and endangered species is because certain species, like the tiger salamander, they breathe through their skin, right? So any contaminants that enter the wetlands associated with upland development, overland runoff, sanitary flow, all of that basically enters their bloodstream because they're breathing that through their skin. Their skin gets wet, and that's how they breathe. Additionally, tiger salamanders, they don't spend their whole lives in the pond. They spend their lives upland, most of their lives upland of the pond. Generally within 500 feet, but obviously the closer to the pond they are, the easier it is for them to take part of the, a part of the breeding season, the less stressful it is for them. So we want to protect the largest blocks of open space immediately adjacent to the wetlands for those endangered and rare species. These coastal plain ponds, they don't have any outlets, so any contaminants that go into them, they become a contaminant sink. So we do really want to minimize the nutrients, the overland runoff, the sedimentation that occurs there, and by protecting a large buffer, as large as we can and as close to 100 feet as we can, really protects those rare community habitat types.
Do they tend to be shy in that, do they kind of steer clear of human activity?
Yes, and honestly, they can get entrapped very easily. In fact, the DEC has guidance on redevelopment and development for subdivisions within 1,000 feet of known tiger salamander ponds. Things like certain types of mountable curbing and certain types of drains for for window wells and things like that. But yes, they are very shy. If you turn over a log and you happen to see one, they'll scurry away.
What about the slope of the pond? Would that deter them from wandering more than they
No.
normally would?
No.
Okay, thank you, Teresa.
You're welcome. Just as a reminder, can you sign in? Oh, I took the pen.
Oh, so I just wanted to say something. The first time I came to Sag Harbor, I was 5 years old. My family used to rent for 2 weeks Cliffy Park cottages in the Noyak area. Some of you may remember them. And, I've been coming here ever since I was 5, and it was my dream to own a house. And I was able to achieve it, luckily. And my husband and I have 3 children. Now we have 2 grandchildren. So our family has expanded. And, for us, it's a lot more than like a bedroom or it's a very emotional place for us. So I don't want to do anything that would be bad for the environment, because I want my granddaughters and any future grandchildren to grow up the same beautiful way that we did out here. So I want to be, as much in compliance as we can. However, if the hardships are going to be just too significant, given, the whole property is in violation because it was built before the rules were in effect, really. So if it just becomes too much of a hardship, we might have to abandon the project. So I just wanted to say that. But, I care very much about the environment. I just wanted to let you know.
So what we would like to do is work with staff to come up with an alternative sketch for the buffer, as suggested. One thing I would like to point out, I think maybe to Harry's question regarding where is it more important to have buffer. One reason that we have included this area and this area here where it's naturally vegetated and this strip here is there's already a lot of vegetation there. I mean, this area is treed here. anyway, we're trying to work with the property, with what we've got, and give the homeowners some area to enjoy their backyard
think-
at the same time.
I think there are some possibilities. I think it
Yeah.
needs a little more work.
Yep.
I think we should adjourn this for a little while. And just looking at this briefly, without much depth, what comes to my mind quickly is creating a buffer that is more circular towards where the proposed shed is going to be located, where you'd like to put the proposed shed. Still keeping some backyard right near the house, because that would that would expand on a buffer already that's not so active as the house is. And you may want to consider not having the shed. It's only 120 square feet. I don't know how valuable that is to your client, just a possibility. And there might be a way to move the driveway a little farther over, expand the buffer by the road. But those are just some things that you can look at and play around with to try to achieve the average overall buffer, and see what the staff says and see what we would say then.
I had all of those same thoughts. If you look at my picture number 2, that's the back corner of the yard, which is not really used now, and that's an area that could be added to the buffer. We can consider revisions to the driveway. If they do the addition, the driveway kind of interferes a little bit with that existing.
If you redo the driveway, you could consider moving either the entire fence or a portion of the fence back and slip that shed in that corner over there.
Are you talking about here? Well, if we put the shed in the front yard, we would need a zoning variance. So we're trying to avoid that.
Are you sure?
The shed it's not a waterfront property, so the front yard is the street. If it were on the water, you could flip it. So, I mean, that is possible. It would be in the front yard, it would be right in front of the house, it wouldn't be optimal.
What do you think the odds of them giving you the variance?
I don't know. It's hard to say. Right.
Oh, that's something you could investigate.
Yeah, go ahead.
Teresa Mason, again from the Environment Division. I can speak to the issue with respect to the shed on the street side. When I was putting a shed on my own property, they said you have to meet the front yard setback of whatever your setback is for the zoning, and then 10 from the side and rear. So a shed up there would require a variance, not only from the front yard setback, but most likely for an accessory structure in a front yard as well. So, I think there are other possibilities, other ways to put the shed, maintain a shed on the property while achieving a larger buffer. One possibility is to put it close to the existing framed accessory building, maybe putting a small patio between the two and making it like a little area, seating area or something. I think there's alternatives to trying to put it in the front. I'd rather not send someone to the zoning board if we can avoid that.
Okay.
Well, they could at least investigate that. I think they might have some compassion considering the property and its limitations and what they have to do with it. So I wouldn't rule it out.
There are possibilities, do some work on it, and let's see what we can come up with. How soon do you want to meet again?
Well, our schedule is not going to allow much before July. July 12th, I've got.
July 12th?
I'm sorry, what day?
July 12th?
July 12th.
June is really pretty full.
Okay, I guess we'll
Got
take that.
5 and 4.
What day of the week is that?
It'll be a Wednesday.
Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak on this application? Charlie, anybody on Zoom?
I see no hands.
Is there a motion to adjourn to July 12th?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. K023008, Michael Sonnenfeld.
You have affidavits of posting and mailing, and the board does have jurisdiction to open the meeting. I've reviewed the scanned copies, and those are the originals. Just standing up.
Yeah, I got it for you. I'll leave it
Kelly?
on top. Teach Dan and Jeremiah how to
Got a
phone.
phone, we can roadmap training.
Yeah. Just can't handle it.
Just can't handle it.
Standard size,
It's on.
18 wide, it's
Sorry.
1836.
Yep. Sorry again.
It's okay. Could have said, you could have said.
Try to keep things in the same place.
Make more room to do anything.
But that's already there.
Prep had a 50-foot pool. I'm sure I'm gonna go. It was big.
Teresa?
Thank you.
Hello.
What did we do before copying machines?
For color laser.
Use a lot of film, I guess.
It's amazing the quality of photos that people are giving us these days. But go ahead when you're ready.
Did you Photoshop any of these, Daphne?
I'm sorry?
Did you Photoshop any of these?
No. I would have put myself in them then. Daphne Vaughn, Surfside Environmental Planning. I'm here for Michael Sonnenfeld with Martha Reichert, who will speak later. This is for 1135 Mecox Road. The subject property is located on the corners of both Mecox Road and Ocean Road in Bridgehampton and contains a dug pond that is first present in the 1984 aerials of the property. The lot currently contains a two-story residence with an associated porch, a detached accessory building, and a circular earth driveway with cattle grates at both entries, as well as a perimeter 8-foot deer fence. No other wetlands exist on this property. The proposed project is to demolish the existing residence with a footprint of 932 square feet, located 100 feet from the wetland boundary, as well as to demolish the associated porch, that's 91.4 feet from the wetland boundary, and to abandon the existing standard septic system, gas and water lines. A portion of the existing driveway will also be removed, that's closest to the wetlands, which will include one of the existing entry points and its associated cattle grate. A new two-story residence is proposed at 101.9 feet from the wetlands with a footprint of 1,922 square feet. A first-floor deck comprised of 1,527 square feet is also proposed, and that will go around the entire residence. That's at its closest point, 100.1 feet from the wetland boundary. And that's the closest point of the project. There was also a small 250 square foot second floor deck that will contain a 32 square foot spa, and both of those are located over 100 feet from the wetlands.
A new alternative sanitary system is proposed with a maximized wetland setback of 175 feet from the wetland boundary that will be shared between the new residence and the existing detached accessory building. New gas, water, and electric lines will be supplied to both buildings. And dry wells will be installed for roof runoff. All of the work associated with the residence will take place 100 feet or more landward of the closest point of the wetlands. A similar approval was granted on this property by this board about 6 years ago on May 12th of 2017 under permit number CB 17016, which expired back in November of 2020. That permit granted approval to demolish both of the buildings on the property and to upgrade with a newer standard sanitary system. The prior approval granted a residence with a larger footprint that was about 615 square feet larger than what we're presently proposing at a similar wetland setback. A 75-foot naturally vegetated wetlands non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffer was required to be covenanted and established as mitigation for the project. That covenant was filed on May 4th of 2017. However, none of the construction work was completed to date or prior to the expiration of the permit back in 2020. Part of the original approved mitigation included complete removal of the existing 8-foot deer fencing, hedge lines, ornamental turf and landscaping, regrading and planting of nearly the entire buffer and pond area with native vegetation, and relocation of the fence line to the landward limit of the 75-foot buffer. So you're probably asking yourself, why are we here? We are here today because we would like to discuss with you our client's continued request to have quiet enjoyment of his property, as well as for his need for safety and security of this very busy back roads corner lot in Bridgehampton. The proposed structures meet the requirements of Chapter 325 and have been designed to the highest environmental energy standards that are available today. The original proposal that we submitted for the project, we requested to maintain the existing deer fence lines as shown on the survey. I would walk over there, but all my papers can fall. On the Mecox Road side, it's about just off the property line to the south, and it's in the property. It's about 15 or so feet on the Ocean Road side on the east. Excuse me. The proposal was to cut that fence down from the 8-foot height, which is not legal, to a 6-foot height, and raising up the bottom portion of the fence by 18 inches to allow for passage of small wildlife. However, after we received the Environment Division's preliminary advisory report, we did some additional research on deer habits, and we've come up with an alternative plan to present to you, which I will pass out right now.
Thanks, Dad.
Sorry.
Keep going, and then open it.
So we understand that it is not typical to request to maintain a fence line in a covenanted buffer zone. However, we feel that this property is very unique in nature because of the busy roadways of Mecox Road and Ocean Road, and that this is a residential neighborhood in essence that is not contiguous to any wetlands to the north or to the east of this property, so it would not be impeding the passage of wildlife from those directions, which is what I'm showing in my photos. So the plan before you, what we are showing is a dual fence line that would remove the existing fence that's within the property on the Ocean Road side entirely, relocate a fence line that would be 4 feet in height to the proper property lines on both Mecox and Ocean Road, with a 5-foot distance between a secondary fence line that would be a higher fence of 6 feet at that 5-foot mark inside the property. And in between those fences, we would plant essentially a native hedge line of bayberry and winterberry. That would be less maintenance than privet and require less water and pruning, etc. But it would not be part of the buffer. So we're essentially asking to remove those areas from the covenanted buffer area to maintain these fence lines and hedge line so that we can have these multiple reasons for that. So the reasoning behind this is A, to deter deer from entering the property to forage on the owner's landscape. The owners do not just own this lot, they own a property to the south of this lot, as well as, I believe, 2 additional lots to the west of this property. So this is part of a larger estate. Also, to deter pedestrians and vehicles from entering the property from this busy intersection that is utilized as a back road through Bridgehampton and as access to the Ocean Beach to the south. So as safety, and also there's a concern that there's really no guardrails here, and this corner is very heavily trafficked between Mecox and Ocean Road in both directions. So the concern is that if a vehicle or a pedestrian happens...
difficult to hear.
I'm sorry?
He can't hear you.
Okay, I thought it was pretty loud. If a vehicle or pedestrian happens to veer off of the road into the property, the pond is not very far off of the corner, so we would just like to maintain that protection to the property so there's no liability issue for my client. Because there is a drop off into the property once you get in there toward the pond. And lastly, for the security of the landowners, so they can have quiet enjoyment of their entire property without a fence cutting off their enjoyment of their pond. So I've explained to you the plan, and basically this is a psychological deer fence, essentially. We did some research on it, and deer technically are not thrilled to jump over fences and things that they can't necessarily see. We're thinking of making the inner fence a solid fence, so it's harder for them to see what would be behind it. So it would be maybe a wire fence in the front on the property line with the vegetation behind it, and then a solid 6-foot fence behind that to deter them. Oh, and the last thing is, that I didn't mention, is that the other cattle grate that's on the, what side is that? I don't even know.
East.
East. East?
Well, no, the cattle grates are on the north, the two driveways on the north.
Yeah, so we were talking about removing the eastern side one already. This would be the western side one would also be removed, and the entrance for that side of the driveway would be replaced with an electric gate. That would be 8 feet in height, which is legal per the town code. So the photos that I've submitted, I'm showing you, the existing residence, the detached accessory building, the existing driveway. The driveway that would remain would be slightly expanded because it's kind of narrow right now. and then different angles of the existing wetland boundary, the pond, and, oh, the one thing I did not mention as well, in this plan, aside from the fence lines, is also a native planting plan for the restoration of the lawn areas in the most important part of the covenanted buffer area that would remain, which is the slope between the proposed development and the pond edge, which is the wetland boundary. So we're proposing a number of native grasses, flowers, and some shrubs that would be planted underneath the two beautiful, well-established ironwood trees on the property that are also shown in my photos. Does anyone have any questions for me?
I do. Interesting concept. We don't usually approve things like this, but I think it's appropriate to listen and wrestle with that to see. It looks like the primary objective are twofold: the security and also to prevent deer from destroying all the plants in the property.
Getting the fence out of the buffer.
Yeah. Don't misinterpret, I'm not saying this is what we're gonna do, but what I'm saying is that one modification to that fence that you might consider is to create some openings at the bottom every so often so that smaller animals could enter and exit, like perhaps foxes or a stray cat or a muskrat, if it might be doing something in the pond. There are any number of small, raccoons or possums. And I really don't have the background to tell you what specifications that should be, but what I'm visualizing is something that allows an opening that moves up maybe 6 inches to a foot, or something that would allow for, every 10 feet or so in both fences. Don't take that to the bank, but just that's the concept. I'm sure there are people that understand what dimensions there should be if we approve something like this.
Understood.
I would not raise it 18 inches. I've seen deer go under as low as a foot.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're versatile.
Sneaky.
They do the limbo.
They will do what they gotta do.
Okay. Martha is here, and I know she has some interesting things to tell you about. I signed you in already.
Thank you, Daphne.
This is the first handout to pass out. Grab these two third.
Sounds like what's my
Oh,
line?
thank you.
Pass them down. Certainly.
All right, does everyone have a copy? All right, not often you get a handout that has artwork on it, but I thought that it would be important today to give everyone some context. So, for the record, my name is Martha Reichert, Toomey Latham Shea, Kelly Dubin Corderaro, for the applicant Michael Sonnenfeld. Our client first purchased this property in 2010 following the passing of its prior owner, Dara Park, who was a renowned landscape painter. In fact, the painting that sits right outside this room of the Shinnecock Canal is Mr. Park's work. And so we can look at his paintings, but I think first I'd like to draw your eye to the compilation of historic aerials, and so that you can see that this property, going all the way back to 1962, was an agricultural field. And in 1976, it remains an agricultural field. In 1978, it is still under production, but the prior owner at that point, Ms. Gladys R. Morgan, subdivided the property into 3 lots. And when she did so, the planning board required her to grant to the trustees of the freeholders a 30-foot wide drainage easement to channel runoff sheeting from the fields to the north, but also, I imagine, from Mecox Road. And to this day, there is a highway culvert that funnels that road runoff directly into this pond. Mr. Park purchased the property in 1980. And as you can see from the 1984 aerial, suddenly there's a pond. And so I draw you now to the paintings that Mr. Park did in the very beginning. So this handout right here. The first two paintings are prior to his construction of the pond. And they show very much what you see in the 1978 aerial of sort of this low-lying area that was the drainage easement. And I found online a tribute to Mr. Park, written by his college roommate, Mr. David Grant Noble, saying, "When Dara moved from Manhattan to Bridgehampton, Long Island, in 1980, another creative expression emerged, landscaping and gardening. He built a pond, put in a variety of native plantings, and developed a network of pathways through the luxuriant vegetation. Wildlife thrived in this environment. Dara cared for every tree, bush, and flower as it were a personal friend, and kept knew all the birds that came and went through the seasons." I won't read the rest of the quote, but it was about how much Mr. Park enjoyed the birds that overwintered in his pond. And I offer all of this to sort of provide a different level of historical context to this property that was not reflected in the preliminary advisory report, which focused on more current conditions. But I think that that history is important to know that what we see here today is the end result of Mr. Park's very intentional landscape here. He created this pond, he planted it very intentionally, and in fact, if you look at the 1984 aerial along the easterly property line, you can see the beginning of the hedge that he planted. And by the 1906 aerial along that easterly side, and even the northerly one, you can see that that hedge is quite mature. And that's the existing privet that's there today. But we're, again, just offering it for historical context that it was here and well established by the mid-90s and possibly prior to the inception of the wetlands law. Again, this is just to provide context about how this land came to be, that those paths and everything and the vegetation was an intentional landscape choice as it transitioned from an agricultural field to Mr. Park's creative vision. He created himself a ramble, right? And so that's what I wanted to offer into the record, and if anyone has any questions about it, please let me know.
Did you say there's a culvert going from the road into the pond?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't go directly into the pond, but it's probably about, 20, 30 feet from the pond's edge, but everything's been graded. If you look at the topography on the survey, this is the drainage culvert right here, and you can see how everything has been graded to channel water and road surface water runoff into this pond, which, again, is subject to a drainage easement for that very purpose.
I can remember years ago, before my hair was this color, that before the houses were built north of Mecox Road, that when there was a heavy rain event, it was normal that there was significant rainfall coming off those fields through that property. But since the development of houses north of there, that runoff has drastically reduced, perhaps is non-existent. So I suspect now the culvert pretty much takes road runoff only.
Correct. And that culvert is not within my client's control. It is within the purview of the highway department, as it is located in their right-of-way.
But I don't think that structure and the water movement is particularly important on this application, it's just historical.
Sure, just providing the context for how this pond came into being, because it is, an intentionally constructed and dug pond.
Anything else?
No?
Thank you.
Good evening, Teresa Mason again from the Environment Division. During our review of the application, we found that most of the construction is compliant with the terms of chapter, or the requirements of chapter 325. The main concern that we had is the request to retain the fence within the existing covenanted buffer, which Mr. Sonnenfeld agreed to and signed and filed with the county clerk's office in 2017, which specifically says no structures inclusive of fences is allowed within the covenanted buffer. The reason we don't allow for fences in the covenanted buffer is for several reasons. It's a structure within, the 75 feet of the wetlands, which is generally prohibited. It is a barrier to animal movement and wildlife movement. It is, it is contrary to every other covenant that the Conservation Board has ever required since we've started requiring covenants. So, we're very concerned about allowing for a fence within the existing buffer. I did this afternoon have an opportunity to speak with Dave Kanji, the principal building inspector, and based on my discussion, the revised project plans is not going to comply with section 330-109, which is fences and berms. Based on my discussion with him, a fence in excess of 4 feet is not allowed within 80 feet of Ocean Road. A fence in excess of 4 feet is not allowed within 5 feet of Mecox Road. So that is based on my discussion this morning with Dave Kanji, the principal building inspector, who was, as the chief, was not available at the time. Whether the Conservation Board is willing to grant something of that nature, they would need variances for that. And I don't see that I don't know if the Zoning Board of Appeals would be willing to consider that. In addition, if you read the code section, it says ARB approval would also be required to screen any fences in excess of 6 feet in the front yard. So I think the project plan really needs to be reconsidered, and it needs to be done consistent with our previous recommendations on this specific property and on other properties and all other properties that we require buffers on. And in hearing the testimony from Ms. Vaughn, the applicant has a large compound of properties. Shutting this area off to animal movement, wildlife, it seems that they're going to get full enjoyment of their property, and they're forcing other wildlife out into the road. And part of the issue with forcing animals outside of a specific property is now that the other property owners now have to bear the burden of the animals on their property. And those animals are now out in the road and likely, again, because it is a fast road, to be hit and cause car accidents and things of that nature. So again, we recommend that the buffer be removed. If you want to have a fence, it could be on the westerlymost boundary of the buffer, consistent with our requirements on other applications. But it really is contrary to the wetland permit issuance standards, which specifically says you have to protect wildlife movement corridors for wetland species, dependent species. And that's all I have at the moment. So, do you have any questions for me?
Thank you.
Hello, Martha Reichert again for the applicant. So I consulted with Sean McDermott, the chief building inspector, about what the appropriate corner clearance is, because there is a section of the code regarding corner lots and clearance at intersections. In fact, you can see it in the road to the west. Is that Jobs area where Arts Field
Yes,
is?
Job's Lane.
Job's Lane, right? And so there you will see, if you go past there, where there is a triangular sort of where the fence is set back. And so when I spoke with Sean McDermott, in order to comply with the corner clearance, the fence would have to be set in like this. And it's 50 feet, not 80, according to the town code. Being that that would remove, sort of a certain portion of the buffer from being within the property, it creates sort of an out of possession issue from a title perspective. We felt that it would make more sense to seek a variance from the zoning board for that, given that there is plenty of clearance from the edge of pavement. It's consistent and meets many of the same clearances for the property to the north and many of the other properties in the area, which are also corner lots. This is a rule that is being enforced more than it has in the past with respect to corner lots, but we think that we could make a good showing before the zoning board for a variance, and that it would be more important to create something that is consistent with what everyone else benefits from across Mecox Road, across from Ocean Avenue, which is the same form of fencing and hedging. Again, I think that what we're dealing with here is a very unusual property. I know the Conservation Board often talks about how every property is different, so there is no precedential value, but in here it is quite limited because you don't end up very often with a pond, a man-made pond, on a corner lot in the two front yards. And so where we're really coming from with this application is the safety concerns. The town of Southampton, whether it's the CPF fund buys something or it's a water recharge basin, the first thing the town does is they put a 6-foot chain link fence and occasionally higher with barbed wire, because what we call in the law an attractive nuisance, right? And here we have an incredibly attractive nuisance, but also a safety issue because this is a heavily trafficked road in terms of the liability to my client to, there are no guardrails anywhere around other than to protect the highway culvert, but there's nothing to prevent a car from entering into this pond. And from the road, as again, the topography on the survey shows, it has been graded intentionally to sort of, again, direct water into the pond, and it is steep. So safety is a primary concern for us. And so that's why we're asking the board to sort of but find the flexibility in the fact that there is limited presidential value here. The fencing that we're looking for can, with, a variance, its height is permissible in terms of a 6-foot fence. So is the 4-foot fence pursuant to, the only area where there is a potential issue for it is again in that corner clearance area, but we believe that we could go to the zoning board and obtain those variances rather than present on our plan right now a fence that conforms to the zoning, but in some ways really takes away from the covenanted buffer. And I do also want to point out one further thing about the covenanted buffer. When an applicant applies to this board for a wetlands permit, there is a period where it takes a grand leap of faith, because in order to get that wetlands permit, it has to permanently encumber its property through the declaration of covenants and restrictions. Here, my client never procured the next step, which is the building permit. So he never got the benefit of the bargain of why he gave this covenanted buffer. So I want to establish that as well in terms of, when we talk about the buffer that exists, it was for a project that was never built, right? And the recitals in the declaration, the standard one that the town has, talks about that, in exchange for the project that was approved, that's why the covenanted buffer was granted. I think that, should this board be willing to approve what we're proposing here, which again meets all of the recommended setbacks in the code for structures, septic, and with respect to septic exceeds, and because we are now building a different project from what was approved in 2017, there will be an IA system on this property, which I think this board has said several times, they prefer to see, they have a preference for the conversion to an IA, that its mitigative benefits in terms of nitrogen are very important. And so here we have a property that not only will have an IA, but will actually fully comply with the recommended setbacks. So again, I ask, what is the true harm of the fence, especially if we can incorporate some of Mr. Ludlow's suggestions regarding creating openings for passage of animals, and in terms of this, where we're proposing this fencing is not contiguous with another wetland. It's contiguous with a very busy intersection, heavily trafficked. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Thank you, Martha.
Teresa Mason again from the Environment Division. Just to clarify, under the new Suffolk County Department of Health Services law that went into effect earlier or late last year or the year before, this project is required to be equipped with an IA septic system. So that's not mitigation, that is a requirement. The 75-foot buffer that is being established and was established pursuant to the previous permit is not additional mitigation. That is a requirement under Chapter 325. The context that this is a man-made pond and possibly of less value is nonsensical, because if you look at the surveys, it's in groundwater. And it's a direct conduit to other wetlands in the area which connect to Mecox Bay, which the town is investing millions of dollars in to preserve and improve the water quality there. So, to say that these wetlands have less value because they're a man-made pond and it's on a corner lot and, the neighbors to the north have a double fence or a 6-foot fence, that's not applicable because the neighbors to the north don't have any wetlands. Also, the call for a double fence, you're going to entrap animals there, right? Animals don't go in a straight line all the time. They wander. They go this way, and then they say, oh, well, there's a blockage there, and then they go this way. So having a double fence is going to entrap animals. Small animals like rodents and lizards and chipmunks and squirrels and all sorts of different animals. So to say that having a double fence is more friendly to wildlife is not true. We've seen in cases where there have been illegal double fences with small fawns trapped between the fences, and they can't get out because they don't have sufficient room to jump over the fences. So there's a lot of impacts that these fences will cause. Now, with respect to whether or not they meet the setbacks or not, because I'm getting information from the principal because the chief was not available, perhaps we should get that in writing from the chief building inspector as to what the requirements would actually be. But I feel that the fences as shown on the revised plan are not consistent with the permit issuance standards, with the previously covenanted buffer, which was signed by Mr. Sonnenfeld and agreed by Mr. Sonnenfeld in 2017. And to say that, they should get some relief here because they're doing an IA and they meet all the setbacks, that's what the requirement is. Those are the requirements. They're not giving us extra. So I'm still recommending that the fences be eliminated, consistent with the previously filed covenant. Do you have any questions for me?
Thank you, Teresa. So we've got a lot of information. We've also got another hearing to do, so I think we should adjourn this. The issue here on this application appears to be solely a fence, its design, its location. We have rarely approved fences in a buffer. Although most buffers look a little different than this. This is an unusual because it does pretty much just go around this pond that was the Dow Parks created. There have been cases in the last couple of years where I've talked to board members, and there has been some talk about, for safety, for various reasons, there should be a fence in this particular buffer. We haven't always, we've rarely approved that. I don't know if this is a place where we should put a fence. I think if you guys have some thoughts about that, we should share it. Give us some thought. This, from my knowledge of deer, and I've paid attention to deer because it is pretty close to what my business is and can create a lot of damage. This design of a fence with the bushes in between should be very effective in limiting the deer from moving into this property. My thinking is that if we were to approve a fence here, we should approve a fence that pretty much specifically limits the deer. That's all we're really talking about here, because the smaller animals should have access. So the thing we should think about, I think, is if we want to go down that road, we have to look at this property and find, we always look at site-specific. If we're going to look at a site-specific situation here, and there's been a lot of site-specific testimony, this, to me, is a well-designed system that is likely to be quite effective. But I don't want to go out on a limb and talk that way if you guys are all saying, no, this should never happen. So I would like to hear some comments, and I would like to think that if you want more time to think about it and do more research, we should adjourn this for a later date.
I don't like the fence.
Okay.
I think it's not necessary, and it's going to limit access to wildlife. If it was approved, I think it needs to have, it should only limit deer access. But generally, I'm not for the fence.
Well,
And
you said two things there. I'm not sure what you're saying. Would this fence be okay to limit deer access,
Yes.
but nothing else?
Yes.
So if they can design this fence to keep the deer out, but let all the other animals in, then you're okay with it?
I would consider it.
Okay, all right,
I would be more in favor of it, but as it stands now, I don't like the fence. No.
okay.
The fence designed this way, I have a son who has designed a fence like that, and it does keep the deer out. It's only 4 feet, but because of the hedges that are in between, there was one place where there was no landscaping, a small place, and that's where the deer would go over. And
They
then
will find it.
Yeah, and then they changed it, and they don't have any deer. So it does work, and I like the idea of having openings for the smaller animals. What I don't like is that it's in the buffer, and I don't like that precedent. Is there a way of maybe changing the buffer a number of feet? I'm just like throwing this out so that it's not in the buffer. Maybe taking 5 feet off and then asking for mitigation some other place, if we're taking part of that buffer away. And then we don't, deal with setting a precedent that we've allowed a fence in one area. And this is also on that corner, so I don't have an objection to a fence there because you have the road. So it's not as if it's, fragmenting any natural habitat of animals. So just a couple of thoughts.
Good.
I'm not familiar with this fence system at all. This is the first I'm hearing about it. But I agree with Ann in the point of putting a fence in the buffer. I mean, we don't do that. As far as I can remember, it's very rare. And, but I don't think it should be in the buffer. If you can change the buffer like Ann said, that's fine. But I think that I'm negative on putting it in the buffer.
Okay. The principle, the reason why it works is that deer have very limited depth perception. So when you've got a distance for them to jump horizontally that's a problem for them. They don't see it that way.
So I don't understand how the system works. There's a vegetation between the two fences, or?
Yeah, yeah. Put a fence up here, for example, put a planting there, put another fence over there, where they're 5 feet apart. So there's two fences and vegetation in between. The vegetation, and the other principle that deer follow is that they don't like to jump when they can't see where they're going to. So this covers 2 counts. The
And they have to
depth,
see the ground. If they can't see it, they won't jump.
Just to clarify, we're proposing to remove this swath of fence line from the buffer. So essentially, we're asking to alter the meets and bounds of the current covenanted buffer by removing this area from the buffer. It would be native plantings between the 2 fences, but this would technically be a maintainable area that would not be part of the covenant. It would be on the lot line and 5 feet inward from both streets. And the whole interior portion would be the covenanted buffer area to the 75-foot limit. And it is a pond, so it's the 75-foot limit between the pond edge on the west side and the development, and then the entire area around the pond within the limits of the property.
okay. Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak on this application? Charlie, anybody with a hand up?
No, sir.
This is what I'd like you to do. I'd like to adjourn this to, Tom, you tell us when?
July 12th.
July 12th. And I'd like you to do a little more research, both in terms of this question about the setback from the road, get that clarified, although it really doesn't affect us.
Yeah, I was
You're
just
gonna
gonna
get
say.
You're gonna have to get that resolved somewhere, not in our board. We're okay with close to the road or not close to the road. That doesn't enter into what we do. But the most important thing is to figure out how you can not impede animals other than deer with the existence of a double fence with vegetation in between.
Okay.
Okay, is there anything else?
No.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
CB 20026, David E. Jaffe and Maureen Jaffe.
You have affidavit of posting and mailing, and the board does have jurisdiction to open the hearing.
Tom,
Teresa, do you have a second sketch?
Would you like me to make one real quick?
John, go ahead when you're ready. Oh, you got books for us.
Yes.
that's grounds for adjournment right there.
Is it? I think they're already part of the record. As you know, my name is John Armentano. I'm an attorney with Farrell Fritz. We're here representing the applicant, Mr. Jaffe, who's here. And I also have with me William Bowman, who is working for land use and will be addressing some of the environmental concerns that we'd like to address tonight.
just before you get the booklets, as you know, we're here for modification. The reason we're here for this modification is my client was unfortunately misled by his contractor who constructed a patio after the approvals were granted. As this board is aware, and I'll take you to the booklet, this property was approved by this board back in 2020.
Okay. So we have to share this one.
Yeah, there's only 2 of that vegetative plan.
Okay. We can share this one here.
And so what you'll be getting is a letter that was submitted by Mr. Jaffe at the time. He was made aware of that change that caused us to seek the modification here tonight. So just to familiarize yourself with the property, as you know, it's located at 33 River Road. It previously was approved for a structure of approved structure of 2,181 square feet with a buffer of 9,690 square feet. So a significant area of this property, as was required by this board, was buffered. There is an aerial photograph, which is Exhibit 1, which shows the existing conditions of the property. One of the notable conditions here is there is a 50-foot wide by about, let's say, 100 feet beach area, which was approved by this board, and we'll get into some of the details about what we're prepared to offer for mitigation on this project. As you'll see, Exhibit 2 is site photographs taken of the site. This is to the south, which is showing you the vegetative buffer that has been planted and is thriving. The second photograph is looking to the north. Again, you'll see the vegetative buffer, and in particular the beach grass buffer that was approved by this board. And you'll note where it stops by the beached area, the beach sand area. Again, further looking to the south is the established wetland buffer. And then we have a straight-on shot across Seatuck Creek, which is where the beach area is being shown with the dock and the boat. The next picture is of the constructed pool. The pool that was originally designed had a decking, but the decking was much larger than what the pavers are, or the faux slate. There's actually, we have built 96 less square feet of coverage, so I think that's something for the board to consider in its calculus for the mitigation. And we've included as Exhibit 3 the approval that this board granted, and as part of that approval, it's at the back page, but we've blown it up as Exhibit 4. This is the revegetation plan that was approved by this board. It's by John Ellers, and it shows at the time the improvements that were granted by this board, and in particular the area in question. This was with it's a partially in-ground pool because of the water table, and there was decking to be placed around it. What occurred when Mr. Jaffe hired his contractor, he hired a company known as Dragonfly. Dragonfly, when they looked at the plan and when the pool was constructed, they said there's a little bit of a reveal of the pool. It would be better if we could use some of the dirt that was taken from the pool excavation and grade it around the pool, so there could be a lawn meeting a flush slate patio. And he stated to Mr. Jaffe that this would be in keeping with the wetland permit. So he made that representation to my client, who relied on that. And that is really the reason we're here. As you'll note in that letter dated November 2nd to Marty Shea.
We don't have any documentation from the landscaper, do we?
Calculation of your,
Documentation from the landscape.
I do not have documentation from the landscape, but this was an
Attesting to what you say.
Well, there was an oral conversation that was had
Oh, okay.
with my client. He said, they came out to the site, this is where we are. He said, this would be better if you did this. And he said that this would be in keeping with the town code. He made that representation. My client relied on it. We were not involved, so we're here tonight. And you also see in the letter that my client sent to Marty Shea on November 2nd of 2022. In the second paragraph, he does outline what was said, that Doug Nappy from Dragonfly said, that if you put faux bluestone on a sand and gravel base with no grout, it's the same as a deck. You know, it's not exactly the same as a deck, but, you know, that was his representation, so my client relied upon that. And so what you'll see as Exhibit 5 is the Wix survey, which shows what was actually constructed, and that was submitted to this board on November 2nd of 2022, which then triggered the reason for the modification application that we're seeking tonight. And that does show a smaller decked area. So what we are proposing, and then Mr. Bowman will discuss in more detail, is the last exhibit, which is Exhibit 6. This is a proposed planting area where my client is willing to plant the remainder of that of the sand area with the to continue the existing beach grass area to serve as further mitigation for what, if any, conditions are created environmentally because of the, I guess, the area around the pool. So that's a mitigation that we are willing to offer. We received today staff's recommendation, which I believe you have as well. That is it's a marked up survey of the Wix survey. And again, as I think you were hearing to in another hearing before, this is asking for a 30-foot buffer. That type of a buffer is a little punitive in this situation. It really reduces the usable yard area of this property to, at its minimum, about 18 feet. If you look at it, is called out on the survey. There now remains only 18 feet of usable turf. The entire south of the property is basically buffer that cannot be used. It is actually fenced away, so there's no use of the property. There's a major taking if we continue to add additional buffers where I don't think the mitigation that is being requested far outweighs, or the buffer that is being asked for is an exceedance of what should be the necessary mitigation for this slight deviation from the plan. And again, you'll note, there's only 18 feet of usable land after that. The rest will remain beach grass. We believe, and Mr. Bowman will speak to this, that the continuation of the salt hay buffer closing off that beach area, which my client would prefer not to do, but we understand the circumstances and are willing to mitigate that issue, that seems to be an appropriate continuation of that buffer. Again, to the point of exceeding the original buffer, there was a gap there before. The thinnest portions of that buffer was also about a 12 to 10 foot buffer that was allowed for the prior approval, which has actually less coverage. So I can't think of a rationale why that buffer needs to be at such a great depth, and I think Mr. Bowman can speak to that point.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Thank you, John. I'll try to fill in some of the gaps and then open myself up for questions from the board. As stated previously, the as-built development footprint is about 200 square feet smaller than the 2020 approved conditions of 2,181 square feet. This reduction in impervious area results from the slightly smaller patio footprint that John referenced, about 95 square feet. Also, due to the foregoing of the construction of the northern stairs and equipment platform on the north side of the house. So between the removal of those stairs, the equipment platform, obviously the equipment's still there, and this small reduction in the size of the existing patio compared to the approved deck, that results in an overall decrease in the impervious coverage that was actually built. The area of impervious surfaces at the site is the most important factor in determining the stormwater volume that will be generated by the developed conditions. Accordingly, the stormwater runoff is reduced under the as-built conditions compared to what occurred under the approved conditions, slightly. The as-built developmental footprint maintains the overall wetland setbacks under the approved plan. However, the bulk buffer is altered slightly with 2 feet more setback provided on the west side and 2 feet less setback provided on the south side. The required 9,690 square foot wetland buffer was planted, as John said, in 2021. The fill placement under the as-built conditions results in a minor increase in slope in areas that were approved to be lawn under the 2020 plan. The maximum depth of the placed fill is approximately 2 feet above the original site grade. This fill placement results in a minor increase in slope in portions of the site that were approved to be lawn. For example, under the original conditions, or the original grade, there was a 3 to 4% slope on the south side of the house. That increases to a 6 to 10% slope under the as-built conditions. Under the original conditions, there was a 7 to 10% slope on the west side of the house, and that increases slightly to an 8 to 11% slope. This slightly steeper slope does affect runoff slightly. Under a large rainfall event that would saturate soils and generate surface runoff under both the original and as-built grades, surface runoff would be generated and reach the vegetated buffer slightly faster under the as-built conditions. However, the peak volume of stormwater generated by the site is less, or would decrease, due to the overall reduction in impervious coverage. And that benefit, due to the reduced impervious coverage, is realized under all of our events, both large and small. Due to the reduction in stormwater volume generated under the as-built conditions, there are no additional impacts to the water quality and wetlands of Seatuck Creek and the wildlife, finfish, or shellfish resources that inhabit those waters. Although the constructed project does not increase peak stormwater runoff, does not have an impact to the ecological resources, the owner, as you said, acknowledges that the project was not built in accordance with the approved plans. As John stated, to legalize the constructed project, the owners offered to revegetate the previously approved beach area along the bulkhead with native herbaceous vegetation. That's approximately 510 square feet to be planted with American beach grass, switchgrass, and seaside goldenrod per the native planting plan that was included in the packet. The original landscape plan had plugs and, or no, not plugs, large containers on 3-foot centers. I would prefer that the spacings be reduced to something like 12-inch, but also have a reduction in the size of the plant material to either quartz or plugs. 3-foot spacing is pretty big. So I think for that small area, you want to make sure it's densely vegetated. When you're having the plants that close together, you don't necessarily need such large material. But so some type of balance in order to get kind of higher density within the proposed planted buffer. So that's try to feed into John's presentation there. I'd be happy to answer any questions or turn it back over to Mr. Amatano.
I have a question. I'm looking at your photographs. I am trying to discover what kind of slope we're looking at that comes from the pool down to the grade of the bulkhead. And it's not, there's one picture here where it shows the house in the background that shows a little bit of a slope. But there's no photo here that I can find that gives a good representation.
I think I can speak a little bit to that. We didn't run, it's not a topographical line that was run on this. I think what you heard is it's roughly 2 feet, but that is at a grade. I think Will had said this was at a 6%. It's a little mounded by the pool because it is flush with the patio. So I think the other thing I wanted to offer to the board is that in a way to mitigate whatever that sheet runoff may be, and again, I think Will said how limited that is, we are also willing to place a French drain or whatever type of drain you would consider in the direction of Seatuck Creek that would guarantee that this would grab any sheet runoff that's making its way past that. And then again, that's in addition to the vegetative buffer that we're placing there, which currently doesn't exist. So I think what we're doing is improving the environment, and I hope this is an easy application.
I'm looking for an opportunity to do something here, and I haven't found it yet.
Okay, then take your time.
In terms of the photos, I guess perhaps the best one is the second photo, which kind of is looking, you can see the small area, beach area on the left-hand side of the photo. There's the pool fence in the foreground. You can see the steps on the right-hand side. So that's standing on top of the high spot, looking down to the creek and across the low area. Now, it's often hard to kind of get a feel for grades in photos, but as I said, the maximum depth of placed fill was about 2 feet. So in any way, it's not a huge slope that was created. The third photograph is also taken on the high spot of the pool and looking down towards the wetland buffer. So again, that also is looking down the created slope.
I just want to add, there are actual, sorry, if you look at the WIC survey that staff had marked, and we also have included in our application, you can see they do call out grades. There's a grade at 8 feet that is at the level of the pool.
Yeah, I see
finish.
this 864.
Yeah, right, so that's the
So
slope.
it looks like it's a fairly consistent grade that goes right down to the bulkhead.
To the buffer.
Okay, into the buffer.
Right, I think it kind of sheets off in 3 directions, one to the south, and then to the west, I'm sorry. Right.
What I would like to see happen in this property is a reduction of nitrogen on the lawn. How do we achieve that?
I think there's a way to we can have that as a condition of low nitrogen fertilizing. I'm assuming, I know that's been done before by this board. I think we can covenant to that.
And how can we enforce that?
I don't know how it's been done before. I'm assuming we could.
We can't.
I know that's the problem, right? I don't know how you can do that. I mean, we could promise and then.
Exactly.
Right. And I think my client would agree to that as a condition, and then whoever he hires would do that.
Same landscaper?
I don't know what he's doing now, but they can always change. Well, Dragonfly was not the landscaper. Dragonfly was the masonry guy. Our landscaper may be different, and if that's something that the board would suggest, I'm positive my client would agree to that.
Well, obviously, we're talking about removal of some of the lawn.
That's where I think we're going to have to talk, because I think that issue is...
Yeah, I just want to get it out there. So
that's fine, I appreciate that.
No,
I would just say that the width that is suggested by staff is extreme and is punitive to the property owner who, through no fault of his own, made a mistake. I'm not gonna say that's ignorance is an excuse, I don't take it the wrong way, but 30 feet, I'm just saying it for the truth, 30 feet here really constrains the only backyard that's here. I mean, this property is constrained on the north by massive plantings, like they don't use the north, they don't use the south because of the plantings. There is very limited space on the property. He has a large family, they visit. This is something where I think if we can come into a fair width that allows more than 18 feet of usable turf, I think that's something we would consider. I would just, again, I think, part of the logic here is that there's massive buffers to the north and south, but if you look at the thin buffer, it's about a 12-foot width of beach grass. That was considered adequate by this board, so going beyond that, I'm having trouble following that logic. We are also closing the gap, which I think is significant, right? I think to have that beach grass close in that gap where the sand is, where nothing was done, although there is infiltration, as we all know, through the sand, I think closing that gap, we're putting in 560 square feet. We're more than making up for, we've also reduced the size of what we've done. So we're actually giving you more mitigation. If we're talking a foot, 2 feet, I think that's doable.
My recollection is back when this was approved, there was somebody else in your office representing your client.
That is true. It was, I think, David Gilmartin and
Yeah.
Liz Vale. They are working in different places.
We wanted to not leave that sand open, but put some plantings there.
I had heard about that, yes.
Yeah.
So we're coming back to you to do that.
When I first looked at this property, when I first looked at this plan, my first thought was, instead of 30 feet, let's move it 10 feet away from the pool, because that way we can have more control over how much nitrogen gets applied close to the wetlands and close to the buffer. So that's my thinking. I'll just tell you that right off the bat. So what I'm looking for is some way that has some teeth that reduces the nitrogen on this property, because quite frankly, grass doesn't need much nitrogen at all once it's established. And what it does is it makes it very, very green, but virtually all that nitrogen goes down into the water table and then out into the waterways.
Understood. I appreciate that point. I think.
So at this point, before we go too far, I'd like to hear a staff report.
Sure, very good.
And then we can talk about this further.
Good.
Teresa Mason from the Environment Division. As discussed, the applicant is seeking to legalize the deposition of fill in order to create a in-ground swimming pool, as well as to legalize a hot tub, which was also installed without a permit. I am passing out a copy of our sketch, a copy of the survey with the existing, the currently existing contours highlighted in yellow, and the previously approved plan. As you can see, it's not just fill for the pool. They put in fill on the north side of the house too. And it's not that a 30-foot buffer is extensive, because the setback requirement for buffers is 75 feet on this property, because there are unbulkheaded wetlands on both the north side and the south side of the property. When the application was initially approved, they got significant relief for both the pool and the buffer requirements. One of the items that was discussed at length was obviously the sand area, but we had also recommended at the time of the initial application that the buffer be extended all the way up to the pool on the south side, and that there be a more extensive buffer, I believe, along the bulkhead. So to say that a 30-foot buffer is punitive, that's not really the case, because again, they're supposed to provide a 75-foot buffer on this property. They got relief for both the pool and the buffer requirements. And they put in a lot of fill, which was specifically prohibited pursuant to special condition number 13 of the originating permit. So the sketch that we provided was a minimum recommendation in order to mitigate the fill deposition on both the north side and around the swimming pool, the unauthorized hot tub, and the patio. If they had just constructed a patio at grade without deposition of fill, we'd have modified the permit, no problems, no fuss, no muss, here we go. But they elevated the pool by bringing in fill around almost the entirety of the property.
So, in your opinion, they brought in fill, they didn't just use the excavation from the pool?
It appears, is what it appears to me. Because in order for that pool to have been constructed not in groundwater, it would be a 5-foot deep pool. That's a lot more fill than what's, a lot less fill than what's shown on the contours.
And normally, when we issue a permit that requires some kind of fill, we are very, very specific about exactly how much fill is to be brought into, okay.
That's correct. And I don't have the actual originating permit in front of me, but 99% of the time, we only allow fill for the elevation of the septic system. So, our recommended mitigative measures, we feel are the minimum necessary to mitigate the impacts of the fill, the changes in contours, the changes in drainage patterns, where they got relief for both the pool and the buffer. And then now the unauthorized fill and a hot tub.
So Teresa, would you categorize this as a slight slope?
I don't know. I haven't been out to the site myself, unfortunately.
Okay.
I was asked to take over this application this evening for Mr. Shea. But, if you look at the contours, it's at least 2 feet.
And you don't think a French drain would be effective?
No, not
Well,
particularly.
I shouldn't put it that way. Do you think a French drain would be effective?
I don't think it would be particularly effective. It would have to surround the entirety of the house. And it would have to go in the buffer, because they put fill in the buffer.
Okay. What are we going to do to rectify this?
Any other questions for me?
Not at this time,
Okay.
but I may come back to you.
Absolutely.
Don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So I just want to respond to that. I want to just also clarify that the pool is 5 feet deep. Majority of that excavation was used on site. There had to have been some fill brought on site. Again, it was not my client's intention to do that, but that is what occurred. I think if you, again, to the point of the 75-foot buffer, this has been reviewed by this board before. So I'm not sure that the 75 carries much weight, because we have given you 75 to the south. There's a significant buffer to the north. The area that was contentious before at the last hearing, and it was approved by this board, was the buffer that exists today. Going past that is where the issue is. I just wanted to point to, based on, and I've been to the site myself, when you talk 2 feet, it's not a step tier. It's, the distance is rise over run. It's not just a 2-foot drop. It's not a gully. It's a very slow mounded effect. I mean, the house is at grade. The French drain does not have to capture the whole house. The house has its own drainage structures that are provided for on the plan. All the roof runoff, everything runs accordingly. So the only thing that's adding potentially to runoff is the small area that is by the pool. And, if you want to look at the comparisons, if you look at Exhibit 4, that's the larger plan that was approved by this board. You can see the contour lines. They basically run, it's an 8, 6 to 4. The 8, you can pick the 8 up on the north side. It runs very, very close to the pool, under the pool, and then you have it running back towards the street, and then you have the 6-foot contour line, a rough distance from that. It is, and if you look at the survey or the staff's markup, I think the staff's markup is clearer you see a very similar pattern. So it's not as if there's been a great change in slope. I mean, we didn't create some massive area of extra sheet runoff. Again, if there can be a way to capture that, my thoughts would be French drain does that. We can condition plantings. I'm not sure if it's a certain type of turf that would be preferred, but I think we would prefer to have a turfed area for use by the property owner. I mean, I'm not sure if there's a type of grass that is better. That's something we can think about. But
We can certainly try to investigate ways of listening to the board and reducing nitrogen discharge, or the amount of nitrogen reaching the buffer. One thing that I've only heard about in very passing is permeable reactive barriers, where some type of high carbon, low nitrogen organic material like wood chips or straw can be placed below grade and within the infiltration zone of the water of the groundwater that's moving in. That might be a place where then microbial activity can reduce any nitrogen coming off, and it might be more of something that's actually built and could be more verifiable than a low use of low nitrogen fertilizers. So it's something that we can do on our end. I mention it just because we're trying to think of ways to meet the board's demand, not something I have done before, and but that's something that we can look into. I think the trench drain, though, if the concern is runoff, putting a trench drain around the top of the pool area, that would allow water to either infiltrate before it hits the slope, and then an alternative would be a trench drain at the landward side of the buffer. Items that we can look into.
Would you, I got a question on this survey. Maybe the answer is you're different surveyors, but on one, the approved survey of August 28, 2020, I'm looking at a dotted line along the west property that says 4, which I presume is the 4-foot contour.
yes.
On the marked up sketch, it's a Joshua Wicks survey. There is no such 4-foot contour in that location, but rather it's much closer to the floating dock.
Yeah, the way I see it, I'm picking that up too. You have it, that 4 is within the buffer, very close to the dock. Yeah, that's where that 4 picks up.
So what's the contour where the staff sketch draws a straight line? It's near the 6, but below the 6.
If you're looking at which plan?
Well, I'm looking at the Joshua R. Wicks
Okay.
survey received May 24th, 2023. Looks like it's also received November.
No, the Wick, right, the
2nd,
Wick survey
2022.
has, I guess
Choose
what I
any date you want.
would consider the important issue here is that the 8-foot elevation runs roughly around the pool. It kind of rings the pool. That's on the Wick survey.
Mhm.
And then you see that contour pick up at the 6 in a very similar in the similar distance, I would say, away from the pool.
Okay. Let's kind of wrap this thing up then. Looks like, go ahead, Teresa.
I mean, we'd be happy to also explore that idea of the nitrogen grabbing stuff.
Okay.
Teresa Mason, again, from the Environment Division. Just a couple of things. One, if you look at the surveys, it looks like they pushed the 6-foot contour about 10 feet seaward of the house and the swimming pool, and then about 10 feet south of the swimming pool. deposition of fill, modification of grades, disturbance of land, excavation, et cetera, is a regulated activity. And as such, the board then can ask for additional mitigation because it is a new activity that they are seeking to legalize. With respect to covenants that reduce fertilizers on lawn, we have some of those. They're unenforceable. Unless we catch somebody out there fertilizing their lawn, it's unenforceable. We can't cite them. We can't cite them. With respect to permeable reactive barriers, those are new technologies. We've only seen one or two on Long Island, so they're untested here on Long Island. And it doesn't address overland runoff. It addresses groundwater intercept. So when you have a change in grade, you're increasing the overland runoff velocity in an area where it's sensitive, and it's not going to intercept that permeable reactive barrier. So that's not going to mitigate the impacts of this specific project. There is no nexus between putting in a PRB and the fill deposition. Also, we don't know how much it's going to cost. It's going to cost a lot of money. They have to dig a big trench, at least 6, 7, 8 feet deep, so it intercepts groundwater. Then they have to fill it in with wood chips, and again, it's a technology that has not been tested vigorously here on Long Island. I know that the Cornell Cooperative Extension had looked at doing a PRB at Iron Point Park in Flanders, but at this point it hasn't been permitted. I know of no other PRBs here in Southampton at this time. So I don't believe there's a nexus there, and I think there's a very large cost involved at this point because you have to do engineering, excavation, the wood chips, et cetera, et cetera. And again, we don't know if that's going to actually do any nitrogen reduction, and it doesn't address the actual impacts of the work that's being done. And like I said, you can look at the previously approved previously approved surveys, the Ehler surveys, and you can see the existing contours there. And then we highlighted the existing survey, the recently as-built survey, and you can see on the yellow highlights that the grades have been significantly changed and fill has been deposited and closer to the wetlands. So you do have an opportunity to request additional mitigation because this is not the same project anymore. They brought in fill, they modified the grades. All of that activities are regulated under Chapter 325. And all of those activities are supposed to occur greater than 75 feet from wetlands. And if you look at the survey, the pool is 58 feet from wetlands. The buffer is not 75 feet. They got relief from the buffer. It's maybe 75 feet from the property line, but it's not 75 feet from the wetlands. Any questions?
Teresa, do you have any idea how much fill was brought in?
I have
with
no
the grade,
idea.
Grade
No,
change?
no idea, I'm sorry.
We could calculate that, but it appears like it's quite a bit.
Yes, it does appear to be quite a bit, more than what would be excavated out of the pool.
Oh, absolutely.
Because based on I'm assuming that the pool is only 5 feet deep, because otherwise it would be less than the 2 foot required by the permit. So that means 3 feet of the pool would be in grade, or would have been in grade. So that's not that much soil to be excavated out.
Thank you, Teresa.
You're welcome.
I don't want to belabor it, I know it's late. You know, if there's a need for us to quantify the fill, we can certainly do that. I mean, we're trying to work towards a resolution. This is a modification of a permit, right? We shouldn't be considering this a new activity. This is a modification. May it be small or large, I would consider it a small modification with significant mitigation. If it's important for the board to have a quantified amount of fill, that's fine. If this new technology is not for the board, that's fine too. It sounds expensive when I heard about it, so maybe that's not our idea. I mean, we're looking to mitigate the issues that have been created by this slight change. There was fill brought to site, no one is disputing that. I'm just saying, what is the effect? Because what is the effect of the runoff and how are we addressing that? I think is the simple question here is how to address and how to mitigate what was unfortunately done through bad advice by a known contractor. I don't know what else to say. We're looking for leniency from this board to help my client. It's not as if he went out and just said, I'm doing something different because I feel like it. I mean, he roughly kept to the conditions. What was done instead of decking was dirt. I'm just trying to make sure we're not amplifying a situation that is, in my opinion, and I believe you heard it from Mr. Bowman, is mitigatable. We are mitigating
Go
it.
with the sketch and
We don't want to over-mitigate it. I was listening to the board before talk about reducing buffers in other places. So if buffers are kind of malleable, I think we can manipulate this buffer to the extent we can. And I don't want to continue, if it's, if the board wants to have more information from us, we can definitely provide it.
Excuse me.
Sure.
David Jaffe, I'm the property owner at 33 River Avenue in Eastport. I think John did a good job in laying this out for you, but I really feel, I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but I feel compelled to share with you because I've been doing this for 4 years now, and I went out and sought what I regarded as the best resource I could get to do my plantings and my revegetation plan and act as an expert in giving me advice on how to proceed and make sure that I didn't miss a step with complying with the wetlands requirements. That firm was Dragonfly, and I am going to tell you that I'm a hospital administrator. I can tell you all you need to know about healthcare and specifics and answer your questions on that. I know diddly about wetlands requirements, and what I do know is when you don't know all about something that's real important, you go out and hire an expert that will guide you and tell you what. I can tell you assuredly that a grand portion of that fill from the pool was used in redistributing it on the property. I was approached by Dragonfly, who recommended to me in writing that it would be a good idea to add some fill to help with the grade of the property. Now understand, Dragonfly from the get-go understood the importance of complying with these wetlands requirements. They had a copy of the wetlands permit. They knew the players involved.
You don't have to be so close.
They knew they knew the players involved and represented to me that they had this and were going to make sure that we followed the letter of the law. When I got that recommendation from them to bring some fill onto the property, I said, okay, because the understanding was this was okay. I'm not aware about the fill requirements. I'm not. I relied on them. And I just want to make sure that this board understands that I did not act recklessly here, that I did not act in a way that just said, screw the requirements, I'm going to go do whatever I want. That is so far from the truth, and that's what I want to make sure that this board understands. Lastly, the property that we have, and I remember coming here 4 years ago and presenting what we wanted to do at the time, and we had 196 feet of beach, sand beach out there. And we ended up conceding because we wanted to put in a pool, we wanted to do some things on the property that we had to do. We agreed that we were going to put in a special AO system for sanitary system. We did all that. I spent a fortune revegetating that property. And the pool, by the way, the stone that was used for the pool, the same exact thing happened. We had the wetlands permit. I said to Doug Nappy, principal of Dragonfly, can we use stone? And his answer to me was specifically, I remember it like it was yesterday, as long as you place that stone on sand and gravel and don't use mortar, it's fine. So I said, okay. Who sold me the stone? Dragonfly. Who installed the stone? Dragonfly. And I'm just telling you that I stand here tonight with having my property at risk of being shrunk to a point where I won't even be able to have my grandkids come out and step off my deck and throw a frisbee or play or walk without, worrying about ticks 10 feet away from the house or however it is. It's not fair. And I'll be the first one here to say, look, buck stops with me. I'm responsible. I hired Dragonfly. But you need to understand the mitigating factors here, that this was not done intentionally. We're trying to do whatever we can to give us a place where we can live.
I'm just gonna add something.
Yeah.
I know of Dragonfly and the reputation, and I can sympathize with you, because if I asked him a question, and I have worked with him on some things, and he gave me a response that it was legal, I would have thought that he knew what he was doing. And he has that reputation on the other side of the canal. He does a lot of work in West Hampton and the whole area. He's done work in my area. And he gets the permits. I know he's worked with Marty. So I would have had the same reaction. I would have thought, yes, he knows what he's doing. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, so I just want to let you know, I am willing to do whatever I need to do here that's fair and reasonable under the circumstances, and I tell you that I acted in good faith. I relied on what I presumed was an expert, and when I found out what happened here, I immediately contacted them and said, what happened? You told me this, you told me that. I sent them a note. I said, you told me that this was okay. And you know what they said? I said, would you call Marty Shea and explain to him what the situation was? Because I was being looked at as somebody that, was reckless here. And what I got back was a one-liner. You need to let your expediter handle this. That was it. That was it. $65,000 later. And I'm standing here trying not to have my property destroyed. So, felt I needed to say that, and I appreciate your listening, and John can finish up with the
I just want to say something, and I'm speaking for myself, but I think the board would agree. We don't believe that it was done intentionally. These things happen. We see people come in and the contractors don't do the right thing. We see it over and over. And I personally don't think it was intentional, basically, on what you said. So, but that doesn't really have very much with the outcome, unfortunately.
I understand. And all I'm asking from my heart here is to listen to what our environmental expert has said in terms of the actual impact to the property. Notwithstanding what was done shouldn't have been done, but the actual impact, and trying to look at it that way instead of in a punitive way. That's all I'm saying. I don't know what else to say, but if you can see it that way and see what we can do to give us a property that we can feel comfortable with and happy and have our grandkids enjoy and do extra things at my expense, right? I would hope we could do that and not look at this as something, again, in a punitive way. Thank you. Yeah.
We've heard a lot of testimony, both sides here, a lot of people talking. We haven't zeroed in on just what is the best thing here. There are some things we can do. We can go back and adjourn this and do some measurements to see how much fill it is. We can wait till Marty gets back. We can do some more things. The other thing that I'm hearing from some of the board members is that some agree that 30 feet is more than what is completely necessary. The number that I'm hearing, though, is, and this is just to throw something out here, just to see if we can just close it tonight and be done with it. If you say 20 feet is acceptable, I believe enough board members will say yes to make it work. Otherwise, we can adjourn this and try to do something else to figure out.
I wish I could. I can't. There's every inch of me here wants to see this resolved. But the 10 feet that exists right now, and that's what the number is, it's 10 feet. The beach grass out there is 10 feet, and what we want to do is we want to continue that beach grass because of the look. And it really is thick. When you look at that beach grass, it's thick, nothing's getting through there. Continue that beach grass for the rest of the length of the sand. And quite frankly, I came here tonight not wanting to, because of all these circumstances I'm saying, if we had to, I go another 5 feet, which would make it 15 feet, and that still gives us a lot less space to move around. But just to get this disposed of, I would do that. And I'm gonna tell you the other thing, and I know you can't hold me to this because it's hard to monitor. I am, in terms of the environment and wanting to do the right thing and not putting pesticides down, I was blowtorching my gravel driveway, okay? And I had guys coming in and say, why don't you use the, what's that stuff?
The stuff that kills.
Why don't you use the Roundup? And I said, I got grandkids that walk around here. I don't want to die of cancer. I don't want my family to die of cancer. I don't want to breathe the stuff in. And you know what I did? I took the blowtorch and I went out for 3 hours and went with that blowtorch and killed the weeds that were coming up in that. And that's the same thing we do in the backyard. I have someone that comes in and sprays for ticks, right? It's only organic stuff. Only organic stuff. And, that's what we do. That's what we do. That's what we do. And if I'm told that there's a better way to do my lawn and not, endanger the environment, you have my word that I would do it, and I know, you can't trust everybody, but I would absolutely do that, and, because I want to do the right thing. I do. I'm a citizen of the community, and I fish in those waters, and I swim in those waters, and I don't want to see it contaminated. And, so, you have my word on that. So. Any other questions? Thank you.
Did you want to say something?
No, I think we've exhausted this. I would like to
Okay.
hear your thoughts.
Smart.
Yes,
You're earning your money, boy, okay.
Mr. Jaffe has said that he would, instead of Marty's suggestion of 30 feet, he would offer, I believe the interpretation is 15 feet. Total of 15 of, right now there's a gap, but mostly it's 10 feet. Increase that to 5 more feet to make 15 feet all the way across, instead of where the 30 feet is.
It'll be along the boat.
Yes, yes. Is there any board member who is opposed to that?
I would accept that.
We're done.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone in the public who wants to speak in this application?
Anybody on Zoom?
No, sir.
Okay, is there a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Advisory reports, Planning Board, Rothman Dynasty subdivision. And in this case, you don't need to read the whole thing because we already heard that the first time around.
Right, so the Rothman Dynasty subdivision is located at 27 Lower Seven Ponds. They're looking to divide the existing the existing property into 2 residential lots. There's a house on it now. We had previously recommended that they reconfigure the subdivision to eliminate the driveway off of Seven Ponds Town Road, which is less than 75 feet from the wetlands. And it looks like they have elected not to proceed that way. However, we're still going to recommend that the driveway be reconfigured, particularly in light of the fact that there is a common driveway easement on Lower Seven Ponds Lower Seven Ponds Road that is currently proposed as part of the subdivision. We are also recommending that the covenanted buffer on the developed lot be extended to 75 feet, and the undeveloped lot to cover those portions of the parcel within 100 feet. These are DEC regulated wetlands as well as town regulated wetlands. They're part of the 7 ponds in Watermill. Also, we recommend that the existing fences along 7 Ponds Cows Road be removed.
Motion to send these comments to the planning board?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay, the zoning board of appeals has sent a referral over for the parcel known as 51 White Oak Lane. There are several wetlands on the parcel, both to the northeast and the northwest. The wetlands to the northwest are DEC regulated wetlands. The Conservation Board had issued a wetlands permit in 2022 for the construction of a swimming pool south of the existing residence, and they are seeking a rear yard variance, a side yard variance for the proposed pool. The survey that they had submitted to the Zoning Board of Appeals is consistent with the survey that was approved by the wetlands permit.
Move to send these comments to ZBA?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? You've issued wetland permits in your packets. Resolution of conditional approval A 022028, Denise Sokolich, and this is postponed to June 14th. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022039, Helga Weimeyer. Any discussion? There being no discussion, would someone care to make a motion?
Move to issue?
Move to accept, to send the comments?
It's been moved and seconded. Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to Erica Weimeyer for the proposed project on the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I recuse myself of this one.
1, 2, 3, 4. We have enough votes. We got to 4.
I agree with whatever Harry said.
That's the first. A 022045, Edward McCormick and Margaret McCormick. Any discussion?
Second.
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval granted to Edward McCormick and Margaret McCormick for the proposed project on the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022055, Stephen Birkenfeld and Nicey Birkenfeld. Any discussion?
Move to issue?
Second.
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval granted to Stephen Birkenfeld and Nicey Birkenfeld for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022069, Grace S. Sutton. Any discussion?
Move to issue?
Second.
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval granted to Grace S. Sutton for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
It's not going to be signed, so
That's okay.
we don't usually release them until
That's
there's
all right, I know it's
signatures.
not
With Sutton?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you, sir.
Did you get all the pages
W221, W220109, 48 Whites Lane LLC. Any discussion?
Move to issue?
Just a point of clarification, this is not a permit issuance that you're conditionally approving. It is a wetland jurisdictional determination.
We got it. You moved it, and is there a second?
Second.
Resolved that this wetland jurisdictional determination, let's see, let's back up a step. Resolved that the Conservation Board grants the wetland determination appeal and directs the applicant to file the requisite Conservation Board wetlands permit application in order to seek authorization and a wetland permit to clear existing woodlands, and construct the proposed residence, accessory structure, sanitary system, and driveway. And those wetlands are,
To the parcel to the south and to the parcel to the east.
okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Preliminary review signature determination, A021076. Nicholas Christopher and Penelope Christopher, postponed to June 14th.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A022012, Giretti Fufa, postponed to June 14th.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
A022029, Donna Cavazzini.
Teresa Mason from the Environment Division in Southampton. The applicant is seeking to legalize various structures inclusive of basement conversion, garage conversion, expanded patio and deck, unauthorized hot tub, and shed. And relocation of the unauthorized hot tub and shed. The project plans can be, as described in the preliminary advisory report dated May 18th, 2023, can be approved, subject to an expanded covenanted buffer and restoration of that expanded buffer consistent with the native plant list and environment division sketch, which is on file. And we do recommend the public hearing be waived.
Motion to waive the public hearing?
Second.
Resolve that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-80 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A022082, Erlinda Bildner, postponed to June 14th.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A022098, Amnon Ziggy Benheim.
Teresa Mason again from the Environment Division. The parcel is located at 4529 Noyak Road in Noyak. The applicant is seeking to clear existing natural vegetation and build a two-story single-family dwelling with a deck and a septic system and finished basement. The applicant has maximized setbacks to the maximum extent practicable. The house is not unreasonably sized, and they are proposing a buffer of almost 75 feet. As such, we are recommending the public hearing be waived and the permit be conditioned on establishment of the buffer, as shown.
Motion to waive the public hearing?
Second.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-80 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A023016, Harbor Watch Development LLC.
Teresa Mason from the Environment Division again. This parcel is located at 108 Harbor Watch Court in Noyak. This has some history. It's the former cider property. And what had happened, there's a preliminary advisory report dated May 18th on file, but what had happened is that the parcel changed hands and the applicant, the new property owner, submitted to the building division both a copy of our stamped approved plan and a revised survey, which shows the structures as shown on the survey here that was submitted to us, which was inconsistent with our plans. So they haven't started building yet, and they're looking to get approval for the revised project plans. And the revised project plans do call for a slightly smaller house, which is pushed closer to the road, and a small walkway around the patio, walkway around the pool. So the setbacks are generally consistent, with maybe 1 or 2 feet difference, and the buffer will remain the same. So we are recommending the public hearing be waived, conditioned on maintaining the buffer as previously required.
Thank you for
Motion to waive the public hearing.
Second.
telling me, that's what I thought it was. I don't, yeah.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-80 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution issue modification, CB 23006, Stephen Marici.
The wetlands permit was issued to grant approval to remove some unauthorized decks, reconstruct existing decks, and that was conditioned upon establishing a covenanted naturally vegetated non-disturbance buffer. The applicant is now seeking about a 47, 48 square foot addition to the house for allowance for a garage. The proposed garage is over an existing driveway and outside of the area of proposed buffer. As such, we are recommending approval of the modified permit.
Motion to issue the modification.
Second?
Resolve that a wetlands permit modification be issued to Stephen Medici for the proposed project on the terms and conditions of the hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you all. Thank you, Charlie.